Tonight, agenda overhaul. The White House retools its health care plan ahead of a high-profile public summit. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, new credit card rules take effect tomorrow. We'll tell you how they'll affect you and where the loopholes are. Mounting evidence that Toyota's accelerator problems involve earlier models that have not yet been recalled.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. The politically explosive issue of health care reform returns to center stage in the nation's capital this week. Tomorrow, the White House will take another shot at a health care bill with the announcement of a revised plan. Chief White House correspondent Chip Reid has more on what could be a long week for all sides.
The president has said again and again that jobs will be at the top of his agenda this year, but not this week, when his focus will return to the politically explosive issue of health care reform.
I don't want to see this meeting turn into political theater, with each side simply reciting talking points and trying to score political points.
The president has invited House and Senate leaders from both parties to Thursday's health care summit. It's expected to last at least 6 hours and will be televised live. Chances of compromise, though, are already taking a hit. After the White House announced it will unveil its revised comprehensive health care plan on Monday, angry Republicans accused the president of using the summit to ram his bill down their throats.
The American people do not want this bill to pass. And it strikes me as rather arrogant to say, well, we're going to give it to you anyway.
The White House insists there are areas of possible compromise, such as banning insurance companies from dropping coverage, allowing small businesses to pool together to buy insurance, and allowing young adults to stay on their parents' plans. But Republicans still vehemently object to central elements of the president's plan, including forcing people to buy insurance, increasing taxes to pay for it, and a price tag near $1 trillion.
Shelve this bill and start over.
Today, former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who supports Mr. Obama, had a warning for both parties.
To start finding ways to compromise and get the country moving and not just scream at each other.
For the president, diving back into health care reform is politically risky. It's likely to overshadow everything else he does and could convince American voters that he still doesn't understand. They want him to focus on jobs. Russ?
Chip Reid at the White House. Thank you very much. If you pay with plastic, get ready for some big changes this week. Sweeping new reforms for the credit card industry go into effect tomorrow. And as Lane Kehana reports, the new rules are designed to put you back in charge.
Under the new rules, consumers will have added protection from what critics call the tricks and traps of credit cards.
It used to be, let's say you slip up and you're a day late on a payment. The credit card companies would triple your interest rate and apply it to your entire existing balance. That they can't do anymore.
Banks will not be able to raise your interest rate on new credit cards for 12 months. One exception, if you are 60 days past due. They will be required to apply payments to the balance with the highest interest rate first. Monthly bills must show how long it would take you to pay off a balance, with only minimum payments. Statements will arrive at least 21 days before your payment is due, up from 14 days to help avoid late fees.
Well, here's the bad news. There's no limit on how much interest they can charge you. So the sky is still the limit.
The credit card industry's lobbying arm, the American Bankers Association, opposes interest rate caps and insists the new rules empower customers.
The consumer's in control. If they get a notice that there's a new fee or an increase, they can just say no.
Yet critics argue the industry is already looking for ways to make more money and point to this recent Citibank letter. This existing customer's interest rate was raised to 30%, but if he makes his minimum payments on time, the rate would be reduced to 9%.
It's hard to see how that's a trick, giving you back money for good behavior.
Credit card companies can still lower your credit limit anytime for any reason, and debit cards are untouched by the new reforms.
Debit card use is up as people try to be more careful with their finances, but the banks are catching them from the blind side. They're putting more fees now on the debit cards.
Fees that average $35 anytime you overdraw your bank account, costing consumers a total of $13 billion a year.
People need to be responsible, need to pay for the services they get, but they need to play under fair rules.
And that is exactly why consumer advocates are pushing for an independent consumer watchdog agency to regulate the credit and debit card industries, something that banks, of course, strongly oppose. Russ?
Elaine Quijano, thank you very much. Toyota officials boasted last summer they had saved $100 million back in 2007 by negotiating a limited recall of certain models with the federal government. That's according to a report tonight from the Associated Press. And as Toyota's chairman arrives in the U.S. for congressional hearings, there is growing suspicion that the carmaker's problems go back even further. Manuel Gagas reports.
3 years ago, Bulent Azal was parking his Toyota Camry when it jumped a curb, plowed through 2 fences, and plunged over a 70-foot cliff, killing his wife.
It looked like he came to a complete stop and then just flew over the edge.
Toyota has recalled over 8.5 million of its vehicles, blaming sticky gas pedals or cumbersome floor mats for sudden acceleration. But Azal's car was a 2005 Camry, not part of any recall. In the past 10 years, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has received more than 2,000 complaints of sudden acceleration, and 34 deaths have been blamed on Toyota vehicles. That's according to the Detroit News, which also says the administration was investigating Toyota for accelerator problems as early as 2003. Still, Toyota was never told to fix anything, and the investigation ended.
I think there's a very deep problem. I think it's a cover-up.
Product development expert Phil Baker is suspicious about what Toyota executives knew and when they knew it, and says Toyota is still not putting the safety of its customers first.
They have the need to let their customers know that they care about their safety first, above and beyond any financial considerations.
And with Toyota's image at stake, local dealers are taking damage control upon themselves, trying to protect their own reputations.
Toyota has promised me that your car is safe to drive.
Dealerships have even produced their own television commercials hoping to reassure customers. All of this may arm Congress with even tougher questions as it prepares to grill company president Akio Toyoda Wednesday. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, New York.
The shuttle Endeavour is scheduled to return to Earth later tonight, weather permitting, from a 2-week delivery mission to the International Space Station. Only 4 more shuttle flights remain before NASA retires the fleet, and the future of manned spacecraft may lie with private space entrepreneurs, as we hear from Ben Tracy.
Good morning, Houston. Endeavour, good morning.
The 6 astronauts of the shuttle Endeavour have made the most of their time in space.
Sure, you're getting close, Bob. Roger that.
They've upgraded the International Space Station with a new 7-window observation deck and a module for medical emergencies.
Bye, guys. Bye.
But as they leave the hostile environment of space, they're hurtling towards a different struggle on Earth, this one over money.
We've got to have an operational concept for how we send humans into space on something that we don't build and we don't control.
NASA is now feeling the impact of President Obama's budget cuts. He wants to cancel NASA's program that would have returned American astronauts to the moon in 2020. The president's budget would kill funding for the heavy lift rocket needed for a moonshot. It has already cost taxpayers $11.5 billion.
It really is a move to take the government out of the manned spaceflight business.
That leaves it in the hands of private companies. The proposed federal budget would allocate $6 billion to essentially buy tickets for NASA astronauts on rockets likely made by companies such as Lockheed Martin and Boeing.
You could have private astronauts who are really delivering a taxi service carrying government astronauts to and from the space station. It's a totally different way of doing business.
One likely competitor for that taxi service is SpaceX Technologies. The Southern California company is about to take cargo to the space station on its rocket, the Falcon 9. Private space executives see this as a way to keep Americans in space.
The number one goal is to get humans into space for less money.
President Obama sounded optimistic this week when he called the astronauts to ask them about that trillion-dollar view.
I just wanted to let you guys know how proud we are of all of you.
We can see a lot of great landmarks. The Grand Canyon is just breathtaking.
But now they can also see a budget battle on the horizon. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Overseas, flash floods and mudslides have left at least 42 people dead on the Portuguese resort island of Madeira in the Atlantic. Officials say the death toll is expected to rise as the cleanup begins, with a number of people possibly swept out to sea. And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News. An American maverick beats expectations at the Olympics. And when we come back, can babies injured in childbirth be helped by cord blood transplants? Almost 32 years after the first test tube baby was born, scientists said today that most of the 3 million test tube youngsters are healthy and normal, with few medical differences from other children, though they do have an increased risk of low birth weight. Doctors have long used umbilical cord blood to treat babies with leukemia and other problems. But now that treatment has given new hope for the thousands of babies born with brain damage, as well as their parents. Nancy Cordes explains.
Sorry, buddy. By the age of 6 weeks old, little Finn McGrath had seen more doctors and needles than most people will in a lifetime.
119/63.
His parents, Laura and Mike, say everything seemed fine during her pregnancy. But during childbirth, Finn was deprived of oxygen and began having seizures. Doctors were able to get him breathing on his own, but the damage was done. Finn suffered a severe brain injury.
We don't even really know what all the problems, are because he's so young.
The McGraths say their doctors told them there wasn't much to do but wait and see whether Finn's brain would heal itself. But the McGraths are not the wait-and-see type of people, so they did what many of us do when confronted with a medical emergency. They turned to the internet.
Hi.
That's where they stumbled on a Duke University clinical trial led by Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg, a pioneer in cord blood transplants.
We're studying whether giving a child their own cord blood cells, which would have had to been saved when they were born, can lessen the symptoms that might come from low oxygen at birth.
Before he was born, the McGraths had debated whether to bank the blood from their baby's umbilical cord. It costs about $2,000. But they decided to do it because cord blood is rich in stem cells, which can shape-shift, if you will, into different kinds of cells, like those in the heart or the brain. For years, doctors have been transplanting cord blood from donors into children with certain diseases, like leukemia, hoping that the healthy cells will replace and repair the existing diseased ones. It works, doctors say, more than half the time.
We then said, okay, if it can work there, maybe it will work after injury that isn't from a genetic disease, but is from, like this baby, low oxygen.
So far, 150 babies like Finn have undergone transplants using their own cord blood. And while it's too early to know whether Finn will improve, other babies have.
Anecdotally, we've had a lot of good reports that children are developing more skills than they would have.
But she already knows it is not a cure-all.
We don't know for sure this can help or not.
Still, the McGraths have heard the stories of babies who suddenly seemed better after their transplants.
This has just kind of reinvigorated our hope.
And while they're realistic about Finn, at least they're not sitting around and waiting anymore. Nancy Cordes, CBS News, Washington.
Officials in Tyler, Texas say 2 men face multiple arson charges in connection with a series of 10 church fires this year. There is no word on a possible motive, and no one was hurt in the fires. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, female veterans back from war and homeless. More than 212,000 female service members have been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. That's 11% of the total force. 120 have been killed in action and more than 600 wounded. And their losses do not end there. That's tonight's Sunday Cover. The battles these female warriors face after they return home.
Why does it have to be so hard to just have a home and just have like a normal life?
Angela Peacock is just 30 years old, a veteran of the Iraq War who was discharged from the Army for health reasons and became homeless.
So you were living from couch to couch pretty much for a while?
Yep, from couch to couch. I was like cleaning people's houses so I could stay with them.
It's disgusting. It's a national disgrace that these heroic people are coming home and ending up homeless.
It is a female who's homeless, living in a shelter with a kid.
Paul Rykoff heads the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Association, which has issued a report that says homelessness among young returning female fighters is on the rise. The report, Women Warriors, says female veterans earn on average $10,000 a year less in civilian jobs than male vets, making it harder to afford a home. And less than 5% of the homeless shelters run by the Veterans Affairs Department offer women separate housing from men.
Well, there are a variety of reasons why someone can end up homeless. A core key factor that many of them face is untreated mental health injuries, like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, was the reason Peacock was sent home from Iraq. She had spent her time in Baghdad driving in unarmored trucks and fearing roadside bombs like this.
You don't ever know, is today going to be the day, you know? And a lot of us wrote letters home, like, if I die, give this to my mom.
Her downward spiral accelerated when she returned from Iraq. She became addicted to prescription drugs. Her husband left her, and she became homeless. She found it hard to readjust to life back in St. Louis.
War does something to you where, like, it just twists everything. And, like, for me, like, I don't look the same, I don't act the same, I don't have the same mannerisms, like, everything has changed.
Almost half of the women that we see or believe are homeless today are under age 35.
Peter Doherty is director of the homeless program at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA says on any given night, there are an estimated 6,500 homeless female vets. That's double the number from a decade ago. When it comes to female homeless veterans, is there still a lot of work to do?
Yes, there's still a lot of work to do because we don't think this problem is over.
Angela Peacock now rents a house and has new support. G.I. Joe, a companion dog provided by the VA to help her cope with PTSD when she's in public places.
Are you happier now?
I have my days that are hard to get out of bed and, need fireworks or something goes off and I'm just like done for the day, but it's much better than it was, much better.
And for its part, the VA recently announced a 5-year plan to wipe out homelessness among all veterans, male and female. The U.S. is piling up the medals at the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. Going into tonight's competition, the Americans were on top with 24, including 7 gold. And that is all for this edition of the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS 60 Minutes. Thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell, CBS News New York. Katie will be here tomorrow. Good night.